Well, hello and welcome again as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. We continue now with our discussion of Job. Job's three friends have gone silent. They said their piece. They really have nothing more to say. The text tells us that this is because Job was righteous in his own eyes. A new character is now introduced in chapter 32. That new character is Elihu. He's younger than the others, and it appears as though he's been quite upset by the exchanges that have been going on between Job and his friends to this point. And even though he's been upset, he's kept his peace out of respect for his elders. But now that no one is speaking, Elihu will be silent no longer. Actually, it will take us 2 days to get through all that he has to say. We'll find that Elihu is upset with Job for justifying himself instead of God. And, that's a valid point. We'll also find out that Elihu is angry with Job's friends for failing to refute Job's position and yet still condemning Job anyway. That's also a very valid point. Now, while Elihu scores high marks on those particular 2 points, we're going to find out that, well, he's kind of verbose to a fault, which may have a little something to do with the fact that this is prose, and in Hebrew, prose does tend to be verbose. But just the same, Elihu seems to be very verbose, and he also tends to sound rather arrogant from time to time. He very frequently uses the words I and me and my. Which can come off as a little bit on the arrogant side. All of that being said, though, he will again rightly suggest that Job should look at himself from God's point of view, not Job's point of view, but God's point of view. And he may find that the picture is not quite as favorable as he may have first thought. Elihu begins by explaining why he had deferred up until now. But also making it clear that he still has something to offer. He still has something to say. He chides the others for failing to refute Job, and he notes that he's like a new wineskin that's ready to burst. He just has to speak. And actually, he becomes the first to address Job by name as he adjures Job to listen to him. He tells Job that he is mistaken to complain to God, even in his present situation. He says that Job claimed to be pure and without sin, which that's not really true. That's an exaggeration of what Job actually said. And he says that Job claimed that God was tormenting him, which is a little strong, but does much more accurately represent, rather accurately represent Job's own words. Elihu goes on to say that God is greater than man. No one can complain about that. And he implies that God has already been talking to Job. Job keeps saying that he wants to talk to God. He wants to talk to God. And here Elihu is saying, well, Job's already been talking to him. God has already been talking to Job. Job just hasn't realized that. While Elihu speaks of suffering in general, he doesn't directly link Job's present suffering to some special sin, as Job's 3 friends did. In verses 27 to 30 of chapter 33, Elihu notes that contrary to the way Job has been portraying God, God is loving, that God redeems and rescues his people from their sins. Well, that is absolutely the gospel truth, as some people are prone to say. What Elihu says there is absolutely correct. Elihu then closes his first speech by asking Job again to listen to him. We'll read also today chapter 34. And there Elihu resumes with a second speech. He begins by asking everyone to pay close attention to what he has to say. He attacks Job quite sharply in this speech, overstating his case and attributing things to Job that Job had never really said, like saying that there was no profit in trying to please God. Job did broach that subject, but he never said what Elihu says that he did. Elihu states a frequent axiom in Old Testament times that according to the work of a man, God will repay him. Well, to the extent that that it's understood that doing evil is the cause of man's damnation, and doing good is the evidence, not the cause, but the evidence of a person's salvation, we can accept that thought. Elihu goes on to speak of God's just and wise governance of the world, noting how if God withdrew, the very breath of man would be taken away and he would die. Elihu goes on for a while, expressing the justice of God. And finally, Elihu encourages Job to confess his sin for accusing God of being arbitrary, and his sin for trying to dictate to God where and when God should act. Though those two things are correct, Elihu still is, quite insensitive to Job. It might even seem as though he is cruel in the way that he says some of the things that he does. As we end chapter 34, we come to the end of Elihu's second speech. Tomorrow, we'll read Elihu's two final speeches, his third and his fourth speeches, before we finally then hear from God himself on Wednesday. May God be with you and bless you. Again, I appreciate that we're able to spend this time together. I pray that these thoughts help you as you do your readings. I look forward to getting together with you again tomorrow.